and welcome. This is India Tonight. I'm Shabani Gharat, and joining us from our Delhi studio is my colleague Sumita Kareed. Now, Donald Trump, in fact, has said that the US will take strong action against Iran, Sumita, if it executes protesters, as rights groups say more than 2,400 anti-government demonstrators have been killed in a violent crackdown by the Iranian authorities. Now, President Donald Trump was in fact consulting with his national security team about the next steps with Iran as he looked into get a better understanding of the number of Iranian citizens who have been killed and arrested in more than 2 weeks of unrest throughout the country. Sumita, this news came in fact, just last night about, Trump's threat against Iran, whereas, he was in fact open to conversation with the Iranian authorities on Sunday.
Absolutely, but you never know what Trump is going to do next, right? So there is that sort of uncertainty that is associated with President Trump. And now he said that he believes that the killing is significant and that his administration would act accordingly. He added that he believed that the Iranian government was badly misbehaving. That's what he said. However, the head of Iran's judiciary signaled that there would be fast trials and executions ahead for those detained in nationwide protests. This despite a warning from US President Donald Trump. What to make of these developments and to help us decode Donald Trump's strategy for Iran, we are now joined by Navroop Singh. He's an IPR attorney in New Delhi High Court and author cum geopolitical analyst as well with Niti Shastra on foreign policy and international relations. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for taking the time out. Yeah. As always, in speaking to us here on ET Now, Donald Trump has stated that help is on the way. He is almost all set to invade Iran if we are to go by his tweets. But what is Donald Trump's game plan as far as Iran is concerned? Is he actually looking at a regime change, looking at invading Iran?
Thank you so much for having me here. The thing is that Donald Trump is actually looking to, as you said rightly, he's looking for a regime change in Iran. And this, the point over here is because you had Iranian government, which is I call the clerical regime of Ayatollah Khamenei, and backed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Now they are very close to the Chinese for the BRI agreement, which they have for around 25 years of up to $400 billion. And they also have, trading oil with China in yuan, and Iran happens to be one of the largest suppliers of oil to China of around 18%. Plus, Iran also had an agreement, defense agreement with Russia. It was signed in January of 2025. So in that sense, Iran is a very critical cog in the wheel for America's total dominance of Middle Eastern region. And obviously, the threat here framed is, there are people protesting on roads. While, today in the afternoon, I was reading a tweet, from reading a post from Jerusalem Post. They were saying, that there are Mossad agents, who have, virtually infiltrated the protests. And then there was a Channel 11 Israeli news channel whose journalist reported, that firearms were provided by foreigners to the protesters inside. So the point is, obviously, there is external meddling. And we saw how President Trump, Lindsey Graham, and all the neocons in the establishment are egging the protesters to, occupy the institutions, upturn the whole thing down. But the problem is, in Iran, the regime change can only happen when the IRGC, which is the military, which is like a state within the state, which runs all the, oil and, gas and all infrastructure projects and trade and everything. Until that military, breaks apart or they back out from the Khamenei regime, I don't think the regime fall is going to be so easy. So the Donald Trump's plan is basically, to decapitate, to do shock and awe kind of a bombing like what they did in 2003, decapitate certain military infrastructure, target the symbols of the Iranian regime, and hope that, that people from inside, virtually, take over the institution and try to, topple the regime. Already there are reports, in what do you say, in the northern region next to Iraq, that some Kurdish militias were sent by the Israeli intelligence, and it was a Turkish intelligence which asked IRGC that you crack down on it, and similar efforts could also be made in the Sistan Balochistan
Absolutely.
province.
This is an ongoing internal unrest, Mr. Singh, and everything, you said also hints towards that. But now, with the US involvement in this domestic ongoing internal unrest, does it shift into a sort of, let's say, a proxy conflict where the welfare of the protesters has become secondary to, the entire geopolitical strategy over here?
See, America championing humanitarian causes, is a bit laughable. Okay? When they say, okay, we want to go for, we want to go for to protect people. Seriously, the kind of human rights abuses, they did in Iraq, or they did, the famous Blackwater case, which was there in Baghdad, the mercenary army we were put in. Or you talk about Afghanistan, where drone assassination rates, there's so much, or even Vietnam. So all this is nothing but a kind of a justification or a framing for toppling a hostile or an adversary regime, which they think is not bending to America's strategic interest and is willingly collaborating with the adversarial powers like Russia and China, settling the oil in yuan, being part of the BRICS Plus alliance, right? So it's like, saying, like I am the boss over here, and virtually, no one can do. So, the whole region cannot move without me. So first it was, you take out Venezuela, President Maduro. And now, why was he taken out? Because again, he was trading oil with China. He was settling in yuan. So you had this petro-yuan kind of a thing. So now, if they do a regime change in Iran, it will be a critical blow, because not only Iranians have the BRI, you target the BRI, but also you target the Russia's military cooperation, the nuclear cooperation, because they're working on the Arak nuclear reactor in Iran.
Absolutely, Mr. Singh. And in fact, let me also welcome on the show Mr. Jonah Blank. He's an American author and journalist. Thank you very much, Mr. Blank, for joining us here on ET Now on India Tonight. We're discussing, of course, what's happening in Iran. Donald Trump has stated that help is on the way to all of those protesters. And of course, Mr. Singh was just suggesting that US could be looking at a takeover of Iran, exactly what it tries to sort of do in other countries as well, destabilize regimes. But will a military action, if the United States at all decides to take military action, will that be counterproductive instead of democracy? And secondly, how does it really help the cause of demonstrators and protesters? Because Donald Trump has been suggesting, he has been telling protesters to go on, and that the United States is going to help.
These are excellent questions, and thank you for having me. Donald Trump has no credibility as an advocate of democracy. He's destroying democracy here in America. So people would be right to distrust his interest in bringing democracy elsewhere. The protests in Iran are definitely targeting very real oppression. The state in Iran has a long history of human rights abuses, but it's hard to see how American military intervention would help the protesters or bring about democracy in any way.
My question to you is, given your experience as a U.S. foreign policy advisor and expert, what specific strong options, if you can give us an insight into that, is the White House likely to weigh in internally right now that goes simply beyond these public threats that Donald Trump is issuing?
The key word there is strong, because the U.S. does not have military options that genuinely are strong in advancing democracy. Donald Trump may drop some bombs. He may destroy some military assets, but these are not strong efforts to help democracy. All they are is a way of making himself look like a more powerful individual. Military change in Iran is not going to come from external military means. If it comes at all, it will come the same way the Iranian Revolution came in 1979, from the people themselves.
Blanket, let me come back to you, Mr. Singh. Now, Iran suggests that all channels of communication are open and Iran is prepared for all the options. This is something that Mr. Araghchi said this afternoon. But how do you really see Iran retaliating? And is Iran in a position to retaliate strongly, given what we saw last year when Donald Trump undertook these limited strikes on Iran?
The thing is that Iran's capacity, to retaliate is there. It's not like Venezuela, where where they don't have an arsenal. It has ballistic missiles which can reach, hit all the U.S. bases in the Middle East. It can hit Israel very easily. We saw missiles land in Ashdod, Tel Aviv, and everywhere. Last time when they fought a 12-day war in the middle of 2025. Now, the issue with Iran is that this could put the whole region on a tinderbox, because they will be hitting the US. Already they have alerted the US bases in Qatar, which I believe is being evacuated. You have US bases in Iraq, you have US bases in Kuwait, you have Abu Dhabi, and then Israel will also come in the line of fire. And in case that happens to be the case, then all bets are off. What happens to the Strait of Hormuz? So, the problem is that Iran, unlike Iraq, the topography is such that you cannot invade it like 2003 and roll over the tanks to Baghdad. You'll have to cross those deserts. You'll have to cross those mountains. You'll have to, fight that heightened army. And yesterday I was reading, Iran has also called for Shia militias to fortify against the local revolts which the foreign powers may be instigating. Like they've got the Hezbollah group like Katabi Hezbollah or Al Badr militia from Iraq. So all those Shia militias have also reached Iran to fortify the streets. So in that sense, it has a lot of support, popular support inside. It has a support from Russia. It has support from China. It has support from Turkey. So it has that support which will be very difficult to topple regime from, as the previous speaker said, from externally. It has to come from inside. But have we reached that inflection point? And secondly, Iran does have the capacity to cause a lot of damage around nearby. Whether it will be able to sustain that for a longer period, that remains to be seen. But that could send oil shooting up. Will it block the Strait of Hormuz? What if it escalates further? What if it hits Middle Eastern states? So all these are variables, which we need to, watch out for in the coming
and
days.
Iranian foreign minister, in fact, has openly said that, the allies in the Gulf also might just constrain or restrict Pentagon's options going forward. But Mr. Singh, I'm coming to you. You've written on the next great war as well as the Great Reset. So how does, the current Iranian standoff, if you can help us understand, fit into the larger pattern of this shifting global order? Let's just zoom out a little bit and try and understand that.
Okay. Look, the thing is that you have a group of countries over here who are now settling oil, who are settling commodities, who are settling silver, gold, and all doing, diversifying from the treasuries like India, China, and Russia. You have countries like you had countries like Venezuela. You have countries like Iran and even Saudi Arabia who are settling, oil in yuan with China. You have countries like India and Russia who are trading among themselves. And I saw a video of Marco Rubio. It's an old video of 2023 where he says, that Brazil has done a trade deal with China and settling in non-dollar terms. And if many countries join up, we will lose the ability to sanction that trade. And if that settlement system grows up, so you have a group of countries who are unwilling to comply with Washington's diktats. And this all transpired and this all accelerated post the freezing of the Russian reserve in 2022. When you weaponize the dollar and you froze the country reserve, central banks started to diversify into gold and silver. The metals which are neutral, which cannot be freezed by anyone. And that led to, countries trying to hedge themselves up. If you start nationalizing, like what happened in Dutch, they sought to take over Nexpedia. If Chinese companies run. So all this, what we are seeing is that we are seeing a broader shift where countries in Asia, countries across BRICS plus alliance are trying to shift, trying to hedge themselves. If not directly, giving up dollar, but setting up alternate payment system. And that is what Washington is not liking, which liking, because it loses that power to control the trade, which it has run for almost 60, 70 years since 1945 in the post-war order. And which is why I say the post-war order is
absolutely,
about to collapse.
and the impact, right. And Mr. Singh, we're seeing the impact of these geopolitical and geoeconomic disruptions on the United States itself, because, the automakers are reporting a dip in sales. And of course, as you speak, we are awaiting a verdict from the United States Supreme Court on Donald Trump's tariffs, which have been earlier called as, of course, illegal, But let me come back to the discussion and talk about about what's going on in Iran. Both of you have suggested that, in case Iran falls down, there will be somebody from within the country. So who is going to be the number two who can be propped up if the United States actually decides to take some action against the Khamenei regime? Do you anticipate the return of the son of the Shah, who's been seen supporting the United States? And let me ask that question to you, Mr. Blank.
Yes. I think right now there is no leader of the protests in Iran, at least none with a stature that would assume that we know who the new leadership is. And that's the real danger here for anyone external to Iran trying to influence events in Iran. There really is no way of figuring out who is going to emerge. As an outside observer, I doubt that the son of the Shah of Iran, a hated figure in Iran, is actually going to be able to build the kind of societal consensus to create a government. I don't think there is any figure right now. And as we saw in the 1979 Iranian Revolution, there was no figure immediately then either. It took nearly a year for the Islamic Republic of Iran to achieve the form that it now has. And it didn't at all have to turn out that way.
Yeah,
so I don't think we know who's going to be emerging if this regime falls. And I don't think that we really even know that this regime is on its last legs.
Yeah, you mentioned, and you just, brought it home, Mr. Blank. In fact, you've also written about that post-Soviet chaos in Afghanistan, and you mentioned it correctly, that we don't know who's going to take charge and who's going to be the next leader. So that also leads to a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, even within the country. So how might this potential, the protests and, the potential conflict destabilize the broader Western Asian region, if you can understand, and create sort of a power vacuum that we saw happening in many other countries in Asia, including Afghanistan?
Yes, you're quite right. And as a matter of scale, Afghanistan created and still creates instability throughout Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Afghanistan is a small and poor country compared with Iran. If Iran were to implode, the impact on the Middle East, on South Asia, and on Central Asia, as well as on the wider world through oil and other resources, would be immense. So I'm not saying we know everything is going to work out well or everything is going to work out poorly. Afghanistan and also Iraq show us we really do not know how things will work out whenever a regime, good or bad, suddenly implodes.
Right, Mr. Blank. Let me come to you, Mr. Singh. I just asked Mr. Blank about who could be the number two, and he essentially suggests that, it's difficult to predict whether the Khamenei regime is going to fall or not. But you were, of course, hinting at that, even though it's going to be very difficult due to geographical and other reasons. But who do you think is going to be propped up by the United States if a strong military action is taken against the Khamenei regime?
It will have to be someone who will have to be acceptable to broader consensus over there. Because one, Iran is a very different kind of a civilizational state. It's not like, you can walk in and, dismantle the thing. The problem with the American thing is, like they went into Iraq and they debakified the Iraqi, political structure. And that led to the rise of ISIS and militancy further. And similarly, they went into Afghanistan, and ultimately they had to, make a very squeaky withdrawal into 2021, leading to Taliban coming back to power. So in a society like Iran, it is very difficult to predict. Obviously, there are many people who want to come, like Shah's son Reza Pahlavi wants to come back, but he, as the previous speaker said, he's very hated, and he might not be acceptable to all. So it's easy to light the fire, and it is very difficult to douse it. And I really do not have to get to see or forecast any leader who may now emerge, and it may take at least few months, if at all the regime falls. First of all, because the problem over here is the regime itself is propped up by IRGC. Unfortunately, we all look at the Khamenei regime, but we forget that the IRGC, which is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is like a state within a state. It runs the whole industry. Just like we have the Pakistani army in Pakistan, we have the IRGC running all industries, oil, oil, gas, infrastructure, everything. So, and they are the ones who have been running the state. If you allow me to call, I would call mullahs they are the ornamental clerical elite. So it has to be someone from which is acceptable to the Iranian society, military. But my biggest fear in Iran is that it may not be like Iraq, but it may approach like a Syria kind of a theater, where you launch a separatist movement through Kurds in the north, through Balochis in the south, and you try to spread out IRGC, weaken the regime, try to decapitate its military strike, so that there is popular resentment builds up from inside, and slowly the regime wilts and dies down. And by that time, America would need to figure out, or if at all it happens, who is going to replace. Because if Iran goes into chaos, you can all bets are off in the region, because you will have oil, you have so many resources, trade, Strait of Hormuz, everything. And then also you have issues of Red Sea and, Yemen, where you have the Houthi militia, who are sponsored by Iran.
Indeed, Mr. Singh. So it will cause a lot of concern for the entire region. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh and Mr. Blank, for joining us. Unfortunately, we